Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and today we're going to talk about an emerging personal development tool that I think is just popping up everywhere and I've been hearing a ton about, so I wanted to get some more information. I'm sure that some of you have also been hearing about it. It's called the Human Design System. It's something that will help us understand personality, strengths, potential life paths, those kinds of things. And so joining me for this conversation is Dr. Marie Gasper-Hulvat. Dr. Hulvat is a quantum human design specialist, certified family coach, quantum alignment system practitioner, a Reiki Master and Teacher. And in her full-time job, she works as a professor of art history. And in her life passion business, she works as a trauma-informed transformational life coach who helps clients change their life through human design coaching. Dr. Marie, which, by the way, she gave me the permission to say. So, Dr. Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Boy, you have a lot of credentials there. I can't wait to dig into some of that.
I do.
Gosh.
I do have a lot of credentials.
I mean, they all deserve recognition, but for the person that has to intro you, gosh, you know, these high achieving women. I
Right?
love it. So I'm excited to talk about this topic because, as I said, it just sort of, for me, popped out of nowhere. And I think it's something that's suddenly getting a lot more attention and which we're going to hear more about. And maybe that's a good thing. But for me, it just suddenly started to be everywhere. And I started to hear it over the last year or so. And I'm like, you know, when we met, just for the folks, the listeners to know, when we first connected, we were exploring a couple options to talk about because you have a few modalities that you service. Tapping was one of them, and that's how we connected originally. But you really had this big piece around the human design work, and I'd love to get into all that. But before I do, I'd love it if you could share sort of how you got into that, because, you know, we all have these winding paths that lead us somewhere, and you got here. So tell us a little bit about that journey and what brought you into this space.
You know, so I was thinking about this morning, like, where am I going to start the story? Like, because I can start it really far way back. I'm going to start it like 20 years ago, and I'll skip forward. I'm not going to give you the full 20 years, but really where the story started is I'd been a vegetarian for about 10 years, and it wasn't working for me. My health was rapidly deteriorating. Things were just going south really fast. And I found myself sneaking like chicken skin when my husband would make chicken wings. I'd just like eat this chicken skin off of the pan. And I was like, okay, well, something's got to give here. And we were really into like being foodies and like, you know, really good, high quality foods to enjoy, like just for the sake of enjoying food. And I got involved in this food farm co-op while I was in grad school, and just this amazing meats and dairy and eggs from this farm. And I want to say that's where my journey began, because that kind of led to being exposed to all sorts of alternative ways of thinking about my body and nutrition and health, because I was raised in a family where science was religion in an almost evangelical sort of way, in a way that all other belief systems would not be valid. Religion, like traditional religion, like Christianity, was not a valid way of thinking about the world. Any sort of like woo-woo stuff like tarot or astrology or whatever, not a valid way of thinking about the world because not scientific, not proven. And the same came to my health and the way that I was taking care of my healthcare as a child. And as I was in my 20s and 30s, and my health just kept getting worse, and the conventional medical system was not helping it, I started looking for answers elsewhere. And one of the biggest answers that came to me was I found a chiropractor. He'd been treating me for several years, actually since 2 days after my daughter was born. And or 2 days after I had been discharged from the hospital with her. And the morning before I entered back into the hospital with a severe case of postpartum preeclampsia, one of the several times in my life that I have tried to die and not succeeded. um, and so he'd been treating us all as a family and progressively watching how I was experiencing bodily what he could see was energy moving. So he works in a lot of different modalities, but one of the modalities like that he can experience and see is how energy moves through the body, through the chakras, through the various different meridians in the traditional Chinese medicine. And he looks at my husband, she needs to go get Reiki training. And I was like, okay, well, let's wait for the universe to like send something my way. Because I've always kind of been that way. I've been like, okay, well, if it's the right thing for me to do, the opportunity will show up in my realm.
Yeah.
Which is actually exactly what my human design says I should be doing. I should be waiting for things to show up. I've been doing this for years. I didn't know that was what my human design said I should do. And this opportunity to do Reiki training came up, and I did it. And it was mind-blowing in itself. But a couple of weeks after I did the training, there came an email through the center that I did the training that said, hey, we've got this free workshop on human design. And I was like, free workshop, I'll try it out. And I went to the workshop. I got my human design chart. I immediately emailed back and I was like, I need to know my human design charts for my husband and my child now. To the workshop facilitator. She's like, sure, here they are. And I just fell down the rabbit hole from there. So it's Reiki's fault. It's my chiropractor's fault. It's Debbie, who ran the food co-op's fault.
So you're blaming all of them or giving them credit. I guess it depends how you look at it.
Yeah, it's the universe throwing things at me progressively more strange and unbelievable, like and totally not scientific at a rate that I could handle processing them and being like, well, I might be able to open my mind to this. Let's see. I would not have been able to open my mind to this, or let's see, human design 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of circles back to why I chose someone like you, someone that has their doctorate level degree and that is a professor, an art historian, a more logical thinker, because for some of us, this is another one of those modalities that falls slightly into the side of the woo world, less in the side of facts and not necessarily scientifically based. So I really thought it was important to talk to someone that probably had to overcome some of those challenges in believing themselves. That said, I want to sort of take a step back, I guess, now that we know how you got here. For those that are listening that haven't been introduced to it, that haven't been hearing the buzz that I have been seeing and hearing, can you just do a quick level set on what human design actually is so that we give them the basics?
Absolutely. So there's two different ways that I like to approach human design or explain human design. One is I like to use a metaphor. That is, human design is a way of explaining what your life curriculum is. So I'm a college professor. I've been on a lot of curriculum committees. I know how to design curricula and how to fit them into like the university infrastructure. The universe, it has its own like way of telling us what it is that we need to learn, what our major is in this lifetime, what our minor is in this lifetime, what we're going to go to grad school for in this lifetime.
I love it. What a great analogy. So this is the blueprint.
It is. That's another great analogy. It's like the blueprint, the template for how your energy moves through your field. And like all this, like this gets a little esoteric, but we all have multiple different layers of our bodies. And there's like the physical body, but then there are energetic bodies that also surround and are in the physical body. And human design kind of is one way of explaining how energies move through those fields. Like traditional Chinese medicine with like acupuncture points and meridians is another way of explaining that as well.
And so one of the things that you do and part of your business and your coaching And really what I want to dig into here is helping people understand, I'll say obtain, but then interpret, navigate, understand their human design chart. Because that's what it is, right? You say, I want to know about my human design. I want to know what my chart says. And that's how it gets started.
Right. So that's the second way that like you can explain it is there's this chart, and you can generate the chart all over the internet. You can generate it on my website. You can generate it on a whole bunch of different places, hundreds, thousands, probably of different places at this point. And the chart, it's a bunch of geometric shapes. It's 9 geometric shapes, squares, triangles, and a diamond. And they're interconnected with lines. And at the end of each of these lines is a number. There are 64 numbers. So each of these geometric shapes, they're called centers in human design. Each of these geometric shapes has between 3 and 11 numbers on it. And the numbers connect through the lines to other numbers. If you really want to know what I'm talking about, you should look up your human design chart right now.
So it's a connect the dots, a series of connect the dots.
It really kind of is. And so when 2 numbers connect to each other, then it creates a line that connects 2 of the centers. And when 2 of the centers are connected with a line, then they get colored in, or they're defined. So how do we know which numbers get colored in and defined? Because sometimes they're defined, but they don't connect to other centers. Sometimes they're defined and they do connect to other centers. The way we know, this is where it gets a little woo-woo. The way that we know which numbers are colored in and how they connect to the centers to each other is based on your time, date, and location of birth, and where the planets were when that happened. And this is where it gets like, you're like, wait, this is astrology?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, I don't believe in astrology. And to be really frankly honest, when people start speaking astrology to me, it's a foreign language. I don't understand it. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, I believe that there is probably truth in astrology, but I have yet to find like that deep knowingness that I have found in human design. It's not a language I speak. Yeah. Maybe sometime in the future I will. And tell me 5 years ago that I would have been obsessed with a system based on astrology, I'd be like, you're funny.
Yeah. Right. That's where my head immediately goes when you tell me this. It's like, so you're saying that based on the positioning of the planets, the day and time I was born, the day of the week I was born, the date, the day of time, the week I was born, that's it. My chart, my blueprint, my syllabus or curriculum for my entire life.
That's your blueprint.
If I had been born an hour later, that blueprint would be different.
Maybe. It's very possible, yes. For some people, maybe not. Planets move at different rates and speeds, and so you never actually know. So for someone who doesn't actually know their time of birth, there's very complicated methods of rectification of finding out when they were born.
That's wild.
Because the chart can change from 1 minute to the next, but that usually doesn't. Usually, I mean, for most days, the chart's about the same for 6 to 8 hours at a time. The moon moves really fast through these numbers. So that's the one thing that often changes.
So to your point about you can go out on the internet, and of course we're going to put your links, and I'll remind people at the end, in the show notes. So they can go out, they can check it out either on your site or any other site. They can find this. It's not like it's not proprietary. They can figure it out and download and figure out what their chart looks like. The substantial information is really interpretation then of the chart and application probably of the data in the chart.
Right.
So as a lay person, I go out and get this chart and I read this chart on my own, does any of it make sense? Or is it like Greek?
It depends on who sees it. Some people see it and they're like, I need to know everything about this.
Got it.
And some people are like, oh, no, that's way too much for me. I cannot handle that. And they kind of walk carefully away from the chart. And the core piece of information that a lot of people walk away from human design with is what their type is. So there are 5 human design types. Your chart generator will tell you, you are either a generator or a manifesting generator or a projector or a manifester or a reflector.
Okay.
There's only 5 types, and every single person is one of those types. Most of us, 70% of us, are either generators or manifesting generators.
And so we can take that description or that categorization, and then there's some general information that ties to it that hopefully we could see and we could say, yeah, that's sort of me.
Yeah. And you can look up like, what is a manifesting generator? And there will be thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of hits on Google that will tell you what a manifesting generator is and what that means. And there's lots of different interpretations. The thing about human design is there's no one right answer or right explanation to what a manifesting generator is or does. I have the way that I explain what manifesting generators do, but other interpreters explain it differently than me. We usually have some commonalities, but there's fundamentally, it's a system that is open to interpretation and to what feels right, what feels correct to how the practitioner wants to work. I focus in on a system that's called quantum human design that was developed by Dr. Karen Curry Parker. And I really like how she explains human design as not necessarily a fixed path, because some explanations of human design talk about how, well, this is you're on this path, and once you've become aware of this path, you have 7 years to follow your path, follow your strategy and authority, which will also be listed on your chart explanation if you generate your chart anywhere. If you follow that for 7 years, suddenly you will be deconditioned and enlightened. And she teaches it differently. She teaches it as each of the elements of the chart are choices. We have choices. So as manifesting generators, or as a manifesting generator, I have a choice between becoming overwhelmed with all the things that I'm constantly trying to do, because as a manifesting generator, I constantly have 12 balls in the air that I'm juggling. And we can feel ashamed when we drop 11 of those balls because one of them suddenly becomes bright and shiny and we really need to run with it. Or we can say, hey, this is actually how I'm designed to work. This is how my energy is supposed to work. I'm supposed to be running around with 12 different balls to burn off all the crazy amounts of energy that I have, so that when the opportunity arises and I get that oomph to really run with the one ball, I have all that energy that I can push behind that one ball and get this major project done in a week that would take other people maybe a year to do. That's why quantum human design name for manifesting generators is time bender, because we can bend time.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I actually do like the thought around free will. I mean, basically what you're saying is there's some free will in there, right? It's not all predetermined just by the day I was born and this is my lot in life. Basically, we have a path, but we have choices to make along that path that could then change the results. So yeah, I kind of like that better. Tell me, how do people utilize this the most? So I mean, I think of any of these tests, like whether it's Myers-Briggs or it's the Enneagram, I mean, they're all kind of playing into like, who are we? How do we operate? What drives us? Those kind of things. Is this similar? Is it just really getting a better understanding so that we can interpret our experiences and understand the best circumstances for how to navigate? Is it the rules of engagement for our life? I mean, what does it really tell us?
All of that and more.
Okay.
One of the things that I really find it extremely helpful for is in parenting and in creating a harmonious family environment.
How so? Elaborate.
So my child is a generator. I'm a manifesting generator, and my husband is a projector. So we all have very different ways of managing our energy. And also, just on a fundamental level, we all have different ways of communicating. When I communicate as a manifesting generator, I am solving a problem and I'm done with it. I don't have a lot to say. I just get it done. My child, as a generator, and a particular type of generator, which is called a non-motorized throat generator, which I'm not going to explain what that means. But as a non-motorized throat generator, she needs to talk to burn off her energy. She has loads and loads of energy, just like I do. But she's not going off in 12 different directions with it constantly. She's going through one direction and then that other direction and another direction. And she needs to use that energy to get words out. And she uses, and like when she's in my aura, because I have a motorized throat, she can tap into my energy and talk. And it used to drive me nuts.
Yeah.
And now that I understand, she's not doing this to drive me nuts. She's doing this because she has a fundamental energetic need. How can I balance my need for peace and quiet
Yeah.
with her need to burn this energy? And are there other ways for her to burn this energy? Which there are. Physical activity is a really good one. So I oftentimes send her out to go to do some physical activity and then come back and tell me more.
Yeah.
And honor her need to talk and not just ask her to be quiet. Be like, I really want to hear what you have to say. I need a break. Can we come back to this? And then my husband is what's called a mental projector, and he needs to talk to figure out what it is his truth. He can't figure out his truth without talking with other people. He needs the energy of other people to draw upon and amplify so that he doesn't need advice, which that was a huge one for me. Like, I've been giving him advice our entire marriage.
Of course you have.
I have. He doesn't need it. He knows that he has everything in him to do whatever it needs, the problem that he needs solved. He just needs to talk through it. And I just need to listen. And that's been a game changer in our family life, is knowing just those communication habits.
Yeah.
And that's just one tiny little bit of human design.
So when you do work with your coaching clients and they come in and they, you guys are interpreting their charts, tell me some ways in which they've taken that information and then helped shape their decision making or their path forward, or like where have they applied it? What has been the benefit to some of their lives?
Well, I was just talking with actually one of my former students not too long ago, and she's a manifesting generator like me. I was explaining how her energy works and how she needs to be having 12 different balls in the air, and how she's got this to travel. And it just keeps coming back up and up and up, and it keeps showing up in her external reality. And I looked at her chart and I said, well, you're a manifesting generator. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to wait for things to show up in your external reality. Generators and manifesting generators have this internal yes-no machine. And it's you can feel or yeah, nope. And it literally comes out through the voice. And for me, actually, because my chart has to do with embodiment and being physical and in my body, I actually can feel that or before it even comes out my voice. But for most generators and manifesting generators, it comes out through the voice. And I said, so you have to wait till these things show up in your reality. And then you got to say yeah, does this feel good? Or this does not feel good. And then if it keeps showing up, it's probably something you need to follow up on. And the other thing is, I looked at her chart and she had a particular gate that's all about it's the person that tends the fire. It's the person that holds the flame and keeps the flame going all night long while everybody else sleeps. There's somebody in human culture over the evolution of humanity always had to do that, had to make sure that the fire was still going all night. She had this gate, it's the gate of tending the fire. And I was like, you've got this fire inside of you that you're tending, and just keep tending it. Just keep holding on to that dream. Keep responding, to these things that are showing up in your reality. And it's going to come together. You don't have to force it. One of the centers on the human design chart is the will center or the ego center. And if you haven't defined, which this student of mine did, it's really easy to just push through with your will and just get things done. I can do it. I can get it done. But that's the road to burnout. And when you end up in burnout, then the universe stops sending you things to respond to because they're like, you need to rest.
They're going to tell you if you don't tell yourself. Yeah. We've seen that show up over and over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In whatever way that you need to be told. And so I said, you need to stop trying to make it happen. You need to keep responding to what shows up and feels good and tending this dream, holding on to it. And it's going to come to fruition. And so she looked at me, she says, I've been spinning my wheels for 4 months and 45 minutes. You just brought everything to clarity for me. So that was a really fun moment where she was just like, ow, I see. I know what I need to do. I just need to hold on and wait and see what happens.
So it helps give clarity to some of the external things that are going on and how to interpret them or how to execute on them is probably the way. I'm just trying to think about how that comes out, but it's really about understanding the way in which you operate with all these messages that are hitting you externally.
For a projector, she wasn't so much a client as a friend. And I talked with her about, projector energy. And she's a fellow energy worker. She does a lot of Reiki and sound healing and that kind of stuff. And she and I had some conversations about how, she's been waiting because for projectors, it's not necessarily what shows up in their reality, but actually what they get invited to do. For projectors, it's all about the invitation. You have to wait for the invitation, and then you got to make sure that the invitation comes from someone who truly recognizes your genius, who truly recognizes the gems, the jewels that you have to provide to them. Because if you don't, if they invite you because they recognize, hey, this person has solutions to my problems, because projectors frequently get that. Projectors frequently get this like, oh, I know and therefore I'm going to come to you because I know this. But if they aren't in true, deep appreciation of just how valuable your insights are, they're not going to act on them. They're not going to listen to you. And then you're going to end up in a situation where you feel bitter and rejected and just frustrated with people. For the projector, so she and I talked about this, and she was in a business relationship with another energy healer, and it felt pretty clear to me that like there was kind of a disconnect between the energy that she was bringing to the business and the possibilities that she was bringing and how much that was appreciated by the other business partner. And she eventually ended up severing that relationship and moving into a different practice, a different location. And it feels like her energy is so much less down and so much more abundant. Just like when I feel what she's doing and just the tone of her voice, the tone of what she's saying online, it's like, oh, you found someone, you found a place that actually like is the right fit for you. It was a good stepping stone, what you had before, but it wasn't going to be the right permanent thing for you. And that was really fun to watch, that transformation as she just stepped into listening to what exactly the universe was inviting her to do.
And then she got more in alignment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about, you sort of straddle the world of, I'll say, the data, the scientific, you're a professor, art professor, but still professor, and your background of being raised in an environment where it had to be all about the data, all about the science.
I like facts.
But now you're living in this world where it really does go a little into the woo. I won't even say a little. It's a lot into the woo, really. And a lot of people are going to struggle to believe. I think with those other tests that I mentioned, it's a lot of interaction. It's a lot of questions and answers. Obviously you're leading the test down the path of who you are by answering all those questions and how you operate. Yeah. But here we're saying, nope. When you were born, how the stars, it's just truly stepping into the faith of that land of the woo and
it really is
astrology. How do you explain that away to people that view human design as, fake science and just completely made up? How do you explain that? Especially, you must have family. You must have people that look at you in university and they're like, really? This is what you're doing on your side job? Like that doesn't, the two things can sort of be at odds.
Indeed. I don't try to convince people. I'm not an evangelist.
Okay.
So if they're interested, I talk to them about it. If they're not, I'm not going to try to convince them that it works. And my experience is 99% of the charts that I've ever read, when I explain something to someone and be like, this is this, and they'd be like, oh, wow. If we're looking for proof, that's the proof. But I feel like there's a really important element of my training as an art historian that comes into my appreciation of the system, because the human design system it's an integration of millennia of human knowledge into a single system, because it pulls in astrology. And yeah, okay, astrology is woo-woo, but people have been paying attention to and looking at the stars and interpreting events through astrology for millennia.
Yes.
It's a fundamental part of core human knowledge that is frequently discounted, in large part in the last few centuries, because it has been a realm of more female knowledge. And there is some misogyny in the dismissal of astrology. But at the same time, like, I took students on a study abroad trip to Paris, not this past spring, but the spring before, so 2023. And we were at Chartres Cathedral, and I was looking at the beautiful, amazing restored stained glass windows. And we had a tour with Malcolm Miller, who is the preeminent authority on Chartres. And he was amazing. And he was showing us these windows and pointing out the astrological symbols. Because for medieval Christians, the astrology was as much an important part of how they understood their daily lives. I mean, Malcolm Miller was talking about the numerology of the 12 and the 3 and the 4 and the combination of the 3 and the 4 to make the 12. And that, like, numerology is another one of those things that's been with us for so very long. It's ingrained in our human design.
How convenient that slid in.
And the 64 number, like the 64 numbers that are all over the chart, each of those correspond to a number in the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese text of divination that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. People have been using the I Ching for far longer than science was a thing.
But yet, to your point, it still gets dismissed.
It does. It does. And in part, there's a good deal of colonialism in that dismissal, because Chinese medicine was dismissed as woo-woo, as not real medicine, by the mostly British invaders who colonized and took over China through the opium trade. And I've done actually a lot of reading recently in the last year or so about what happened in the colonization of China. And yes, there were doctors who came in and were able to treat certain ailments for people who were unable to be treated by traditional Chinese doctors. But there's so much deep knowledge in traditional Chinese medicine that we're only very recently in Western society coming to be like, okay, well, maybe actually there's some truth to this. We went through several rounds of infertility treatment, and we're finally successful through the Cleveland Clinic. And I asked my infertility doctor, do you have any recommendations for acupuncturists? Because I know that, like, it's been clinically proven that acupuncture can help with infertility treatments and augment the possibility of success of implantation. And the fact that the Cleveland Clinic has at the time, they had an acupuncturist in employment. Like, there's something there,
Yeah. I have a personal experience with acupuncture that, this goes back now probably 8 years or so, but, I wasn't doing any of this work, and I was definitely not in any of this, the space on any of these topics. And I went to him because nothing else was working. I had this sciatica issue, and there was nothing, not even time was helping. And so I was like, why not? Why not? Right? Because you get to that point when you're in pain, you're like, why not? So I did. And spoiler alert, it worked. And he was fantastic. And he did train really with people that had the old Chinese medicine background. And we had a great relationship. And I would jokingly say to him, like, I don't know how the heck you're making this work. This is like, voodoo magic, like joking around. But legit, it almost defies our logic because we're raised in a different way and we just don't understand all of that. And it does seem like, how can he poke my foot and suddenly my shoulder is fine? I'm making it up. I forget, all the connections, but it's like that, right? So there's like this magic there that we just don't fully understand. So I think we dismiss, but I mean, it works. It works. So The same
That's
as
the same with human design. I can explain to you how it works, but you don't need to know. It just works.
Yeah. So as we start wrapping up, what would you want people to walk away with? Is there any one thing that you would want to leave them with thinking about?
It's really important to come into any of this with an open mind.
Yes.
And for those of us who, when we run our human design charts and we see the top two centers, the top two triangles colored in, it's extra, extra hard for us to have open minds.
Doesn't mean we shouldn't.
It doesn't mean we shouldn't. It's just we have to work really hard at it.
Yeah.
And there's also a pretty complex way of interpreting the charts called circuitry. And there's a very prominent circuit called the logic circuit. And people that have a lot of logical circuitry, it's really easy to doubt.
Yeah.
And Western society in general, I think, prioritizes that all of the different energies, the archetypes, because fundamentally human design is all about archetypes. And the logical circuitry has a lot of archetypes surrounding proof and doubt. And we've, as a society, really, like ever since the Enlightenment, we've really worked hard to prioritize that evidence of proof and doubting things and skepticism until things are proven to be true.
Yes.
And there is so much more knowledge available to us beyond that in stories, because sometimes stories are just true, but you can't prove them. They just ring true. There's so much more knowledge available to us just in like, I know this is true. I don't know how this is true. I just know it's true. And eventually it shows up and it's like, yeah, see, I knew it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And, this ties very nicely into the next episode of the podcast where I talk to psychic medium and Reiki Master and Reiki Teacher, Julie Speechens. And we talk about this and the fact that, sometimes you just can't explain it all logically. And for some of us, that's really, really hard to get past and grasp. But if we leave ourselves open enough to lean into our intuition and to explore some of these topics, we might just find the proof in the pudding of the experiences. And sometimes those experiences, those stories have to be enough proof.
And so we have to keep our minds open to those types of knowledge, even when our society poo-poos them.
I love that message. And I think it ties into what I'm trying to do here and just expose some of these things because we haven't all been introduced to them. And I think I'm somebody that, whether it be my professional life or my personal life, I always think the more tools we have in our toolbox, whatever toolbox that is,
right,
the more tools you have, the more opportunities to get stuff done, however you define that stuff done. And obviously it's different in different scenarios, but it's a screwdriver doesn't work when you need a hammer. So it's great to have all the options available and to take them off and dust them off and try them on when you need to and see where that gets you. Because I think a lot of us on this path to rediscovery and self-reflection and better understanding of ourselves, I want to just keep reiterating, it's not about fixing ourselves, but it is about understanding ourselves. And I think this tool is definitely designed, see how I did that? Designed to help us really understand our human experience from what I'm hearing and seeing. So good for people to have an open mind and at least entertain the idea. And hey, get your chart and see if it rings true. There's like no harm.
Right, exactly. And for some people, when they see it, they're like, oh, and some people cry when they see it because like there's something like innately in that like knowingness that just drops in. It's like, oh, yes, that's me.
Yeah, it explains things. Yeah. Love that. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. We will make sure that all your links are out there in the show notes so people can check out the work you're doing, check out the example of a chart on or take it through your site. We'll put that out there for everybody. Thanks again for talking with me today and starting to try to give everybody a little bit of an understanding about human design.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.